The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Gila Bend, Arizona Territory, 1878, as Owen Zimmerman watched another man die at his hands. The blood pooled dark against the sun-baked earth, mixing with the desert dust as the townspeople emerged cautiously from storefronts and saloons. It wasn't the killing that hollowed him, it was the nothing he felt watching the light fade from a man's eyes. "That's the third one this month," Sheriff Holden muttered, nudging the dead outlaw with his boot. "You're making my job awful easy, Zimmerman." Owen holstered his Colt Peacemaker with practiced efficiency, his face betraying no emotion beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. He drew first. "Always do with you, don't they?" the sheriff sighed, removing his hat to wipe sweat from his brow. "One of these days, you're going to have to stop drifting and settle somewhere. Bounty hunting's a young man's game." At 32, Owen wasn't old, but years tracking outlaws across the unforgiving Western territories had weathered him beyond his years. Deep lines etched his sun-browned face, and flecks of gray already threaded through his dark hair. "Got no reason to stop," Owen replied, turning toward the saloon. What he didn't say was that the emptiness inside him had grown so vast, it seemed impossible to fill. 3 years since Elizabeth had died in his arms, victim of a raid that should have claimed him instead. 3 years of existing rather than living. The Red Mesa Saloon welcomed him with familiar sounds: the tinny piano, raucous laughter, and the clink of glasses. Owen claimed his usual corner table back to the wall facing the door. Before he could order, Manny, the barkeep, sent over a bottle of whiskey. "On the house," a voice said, "for keeping our town safe." Owen looked up to see Mayor Pearson standing beside his table, an ambitious man with political aspirations beyond this dusty corner of Arizona. "Wasn't doing it for the town," Owen replied, pouring himself a generous glass. "Nevertheless," the mayor continued, pulling up a chair uninvited, "your reputation keeps the worst elements moving along. I'd like to offer you something more substantial than whiskey. Not interested in becoming a lawman. Not asking you to wear a badge. There's a ranch about 20 miles west of here, the Valente place. Been having trouble with rustlers, serious trouble." Owen took a long sip of whiskey. "Rustlers are the sheriff's problem. The Valentes are good people. Tess Valente's husband died last year, pneumonia. She's been running the place on her own with her younger brother, but 3 hands have been killed in the past month. Sheriff doesn't have the manpower to post guards. Still not seeing why this is my concern." The mayor leaned forward. "Because I'm offering you $500 to make it your concern. Stay at the ranch, find the rustlers, end the problem." Owen raised an eyebrow. 500 was more than he'd make from 6 months of bounties. Must be important cattle. "The Valentes raise the finest horses in the territory. Mrs. Valente has a way with them like nothing I've ever seen. Those horses are contracted to the army. If she can't deliver, it hurts the whole region." Owen drained his glass. "Why me?" "Because you don't scare easy, and from what I hear, you don't miss." The mayor stood. "Stage to their place leaves tomorrow at dawn. If you're on it, I'll have your first payment waiting." After the mayor departed, Owen poured another drink. It had been years since he'd stayed in one place longer than it took to collect a bounty and move on. Movement kept the memories at bay barely. Each new town, each new hunt, pushed Elizabeth's face a little further into the recesses of his mind where it couldn't torment him daily. But $500 would buy a lot of distance afterward. Dawn found Owen on the stagecoach, his possessions contained in a single saddlebag and bedroll. His reputation traveled with him. The other passengers maintained a respectful distance, conversations hushed whenever he glanced their way. The coach rattled over hard-packed earth. the landscape gradually transforming from desert to grassland, dotted with mesquite and oak. By mid-morning, they crested a rise, revealing a sprawling valley below. A substantial ranch house stood in the distance, surrounded by corrals and outbuildings. Beyond them stretched fenced pastures where horses grazed at least 100 head of prime stock. As the coach approached the main house, Owen observed 3 men on the porch, rifles in hand. Cautious, but not hostile. The driver called out a greeting and the men relaxed slightly. The coach stopped and Owen stepped down, dust swirling around his boots. A young man, early 20s, with the same sharp features as the mayor approached. "You must be Zimmerman. I'm Peter Pearson, the mayor's son." He gestured toward the house. "Mrs. Valente is expecting you." Owen followed him up the porch steps, noting the solid construction of the ranch house, 2 stories of sturdy timber with large windows. Not a frontier cabin, but a permanent home built with care and intention. Inside, the house was cool and well appointed with furnishings that spoke of Eastern refinement transported west. Owen removed his hat as he entered a spacious sitting room where a woman stood with her back to him, gazing out the window. "Mrs. Valente," Peter announced. "This is Owen Zimmerman." She turned, and for a brief moment, Owen forgot himself. Tess Valente wasn't what he expected. In his experience, women who survived the West grew hard-edged and weathered. But Tess Valente had retained a quiet grace despite the hardship evident in her eyes. She was perhaps in her late 20s, with rich chestnut hair swept into a practical but becoming style. Her dress, though simple, complemented her slender frame, and her posture conveyed strength rather than fragility. "Mr. Zimmerman," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "Thank you for coming. Though I should tell you it wasn't my idea to hire a gunslinger." Her directness took him by surprise. Most people tiptoed around his profession. "Mayor Pearson said you're having trouble with rustlers. Among other things." She gestured to a chair. "Please sit. I'll explain the situation." Owen remained standing. "I prefer to see what I'm getting into first." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. "As you wish. Peter can show you the property." She turned to the younger man. "Make sure Mr. Zimmerman sees the north pasture where we lost Jenkins." "Yes, madam," Peter replied, heading for the door. Owen followed, pausing at the threshold. "Mrs. Valente, one thing. Mayor Pearson's paying me to stop your rustlers. If you didn't ask for help, why accept it?" Tess met his gaze steadily. "Because I have 28 people depending on this ranch for their livelihood, Mr. Zimmerman. My pride isn't worth their security." She turned back to the window. "I just hope you're worth the $500. Outside, Peter led him to the stables where 2 horses were already saddled. "Mrs. Valente has a gift with horses," he explained as they mounted. "Even the wildest Mustang gentles under her hand. It's almost unnatural." Owen surveyed the immediate surroundings, the layout of the buildings, the approaches, the defensive positions. Everything was well maintained, from the whitewashed fences to the freshly swept yard. "How many hands work here?" 15 regular ranch hands, plus Mrs. Valente's brother Daniel, who oversees them. Then there's the household staff, cook, housekeeper, a couple of maids. Most live in the bunkhouse or the smaller cabins behind the main house. They rode through lush pastures where horses grazed some of the finest stock Owen had ever seen. The ranch stretched for miles, bordered by hills to the west and a river to the east. "We lost 3 men in the past month," Peter continued as they rode. "Jenkins was the foreman, found him with his throat cut by the north fence line. Week later, 2 more hands disappeared while checking on a distant herd, found their bodies 2 days after that. Any pattern to the attacks? Always at night, always when men are alone or in pairs, and they've been stealing our best breeding stock, not just any horses." They reached the northern boundary where the fence had been recently repaired. Peter pointed to a dark stain on the ground. That's where Jenkins died. We buried him on the hill there. Owen dismounted, examining the area carefully. The ground told its story to those who knew how to read it. Multiple horses, at least 6 riders coming from the north. A brief struggle, one man against many. These aren't ordinary rustlers, Owen said finally. Too organized, too precise in what they take. That's what Daniel says too. He thinks it's the Becker gang. They've been operating out of the mountains to the north. Army's been after them for months. Owen had heard of the Beckers' 3 brothers and their associates who specialized in high-value theft. They didn't waste time on random cattle. They targeted shipments, payrolls, and apparently prime horseflesh. You said Mrs. Valente has a contract with the Army. Peter nodded. 50 horses due next month. Best remounts in the territory, but at this rate, they'll keep coming back until they've stripped the place bare, Owen finished. He remounted his horse. Show me the rest of the boundaries. I need to know every approach. They spent the remainder of the day riding the perimeter of the Valente ranch. Owen noted vulnerable points, natural features that provided cover, and the locations of line cabins where hands stayed when working distant sections. By sunset, they returned to the main house. Smoke curled from the chimney and lamplight glowed in the windows. The day hands were gathering at the bunkhouse, while others mounted up for night patrol. We've doubled the guard since Jenkins was killed, Peter explained. But we don't have enough men to watch everything. Owen nodded, his mind already formulating strategies. As they approached the stables, a young man emerged mid-20s with features similar to Tess Valente's. Daniel, Peter called. This is Zimmerman. Daniel Valente approached, his expression guarded. Heard you were coming. Hope you're as good as they say. Depends who's saying it, Owen replied evenly. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Men who kill for money generally aren't welcome on respectable ranches. Daniel, Peter warned. Mrs. Valente agreed. My sister has enough to worry about without bringing a hired gun into our home. Daniel stepped closer. Just so we're clear, Zimmerman, you're here to deal with the rustlers. Nothing more. Once that's done, you move on. Owen met the younger man's gaze without flinching. That's the plan. Tension stretched between them until a voice called from the house. Daniel, Peter, supper's ready. Tess Valente stood on the porch, backlit by the warm glow from inside. For a moment, none of the men moved. Mr. Zimmerman will be joining us, she added, her tone leaving no room for argument. Daniel stalked toward the house without another word. Peter shrugged apologetically. He's protective of his sister. As he should be, Owen replied, following slowly. Inside, the dining room was warm and inviting. A long table dominated the space, set with china that seemed out of place in the frontier. Owen felt suddenly conscious of his travel-worn appearance. You can wash up there, Tess said, indicating a basin in the adjoining room. When he returned, the others were already seated. Tess at the head of the table, Daniel to her right, Peter to her left, and an empty chair waiting for Owen. The meal progressed with strained conversation. Peter attempted to fill the silence with talk of the region's development while Daniel focused on his food. Tess observed Owen with quiet intensity. Mr. Zimmerman, she said finally, Peter tells me you've seen the property. What do you think of our situation? Owen set down his fork. You're dealing with professionals. They know your operation, your routines. They're not opportunists. They have a specific interest in your horses. We've suspected as much, Tess replied. The question is, what do you propose to do about it? Change the patterns. Set watches at irregular intervals. Create the impression of more men than you have. Owen met her gaze. And then wait for them to make a mistake. Daniel scoffed. We've been doing that for weeks. Not effectively, or you wouldn't have lost 3 men. Owen's tone remained even. Whoever's coming knows when and where to strike. That suggests they're getting information somehow, either from observation or someone's talking, Daniel finished, his expression darkening. Are you suggesting we have a traitor? I'm suggesting nothing, just stating possibilities. Tess set down her glass. Every person on this ranch has been with us for years. My husband trusted them all. A shadow crossed her face at the mention of her husband. I won't start doubting them now. Then we'll assume the rustlers are particularly observant, Owen conceded, though he remained unconvinced. After dinner, Owen declined Peter's offer of a room in the main house, preferring the small cabin near the stables. Alone, he unpacked his few possessions: spare clothes, ammunition, a whetstone for his knife, and a small leather-bound journal that he placed carefully under his pillow. Sleep eluded him as he mentally mapped the ranch's vulnerabilities. The rustlers would come again, that much was certain. The question was when and from which direction. Near midnight, he heard soft footsteps outside his door, followed by a gentle knock. Hand on his revolver, he opened it to find Tess Valente standing there, a lantern in her hand. "Mrs. Valente," he acknowledged, surprised. "May I come in?" He hesitated, then stepped aside. The cabin was spare: a bed, a table, 2 chairs. Tess placed her lantern on the table and remained standing. "I apologize for my brother's behavior," she said. "Daniel takes his responsibilities seriously since James died." She paused. "My husband." "No apology needed. He's protecting what's his." "What's ours," she corrected. "This ranch belongs to both of us, though I hold the controlling interest." She looked around the cabin. "I wanted to make sure you were settled." Owen could tell there was more. "What else?" Tess met his eyes directly. "Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Zimmerman. They say you've killed 17 men. 18 as of yesterday." She didn't flinch. "They also say you once rode with the Texas Rangers, that you tracked a murderer across 3 territories to bring him to justice, and that you never miss what you aim at. People say a lot of things. What they don't say, what I had to discover from Mayor Pearson, is why a man with your skills chooses to drift from town to town, hunting bounties instead of building something lasting." Her gaze was steady. "He said you lost someone." Owen felt a familiar tightness in his chest. "Mayor Pearson talks too much. He mentioned it because he thought I should know who I was inviting onto my land." Tess stepped closer. "I've also lost someone, Mr. Zimmerman. I understand how it hollows you out. With all due respect, Mrs. Valente, you don't know me. And understanding isn't why I'm here." She nodded slowly. "Fair enough. I just wanted you to know that I recognize what it looks like when someone's running from their grief instead of facing it." She moved toward the door, then paused. "We ride out at dawn to check the southern herd. If you want to get a better sense of our operation, you're welcome to join us." After she left, Owen sat on the edge of his bed, the silence pressing in around him. He pulled the journal from beneath his pillow, running his fingers over the worn leather binding but not opening it. Inside were the last remnants of a life he'd once thought would be his. Sketches Elizabeth had made of the home they planned to build, pressed wildflowers from the meadow where he'd asked her to marry him, the telegram informing him of the raid on their homestead that had arrived too late. He returned the journal to its place and lay back, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would begin the real work of protecting the Valente ranch, and the sooner he finished, the sooner he could leave. Because despite what Tess Valente might think, facing grief wasn't an option for him. Not anymore. Dawn brought a symphony of ranch sounds: horses nickering, men calling to each other, the distant lowing of cattle. Owen rose before first light, checking his weapons by habit before stepping outside. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, painting the landscape in shades of indigo and gray. Several ranch hands were already gathering by the corral, saddling horses for the day's work. Owen spotted Daniel organizing them into groups, his authoritative manner belying his youth. "Good morning, Mr. Zimmerman." Owen turned to find Tess approaching, dressed for riding in a practical split skirt and jacket. Her hair was braided and pinned up beneath a wide-brimmed hat, giving her a frontier practicality that somehow enhanced rather than diminished her natural grace. "Mrs. Valente," he acknowledged. "I'll be joining your ride this morning," she nodded. "I've had Rosa pack provisions. We'll be gone most of the day." She gestured to the corral. "Miguel has saddled Thunder for you, the bay gelding. He's spirited but reliable." Owen followed her to where a muscular bay horse waited, its coat gleaming in the early light. The animal eyed him warily as he approached. "He doesn't take to strangers easily," Tess warned. Owen extended his hand slowly, letting the horse catch his scent. After a moment's hesitation, Thunder nudged his palm. "He seems willing to make an exception," Owen observed. Tess smiled for the first time since he'd arrived, a genuine expression that transformed her face. Horses are excellent judges of character, better than people, sometimes. Their group consisted of Tess, Daniel, Owen, and 4 ranch hands. They rode south through rolling grasslands dotted with stands of oak and mesquite. The horses moved at an easy lope, covering ground efficiently. Owen watched Tess as she rode confident and at ease in the saddle, frequently ranging ahead to check conditions or point out landmarks. "The southern pasture has our breeding mares and yearlings," she explained as they rode. "It's our most valuable stock and the most vulnerable. The Army contract is specifically for horses from these bloodlines." "How many have you lost?" Owen asked. 12 of our best mares in the past month. At $500 per horse, that's a significant loss." "And that's just their purchase price," Daniel added, pulling alongside them. "Their breeding value is much higher. Each of those mares could produce 10 foals in her lifetime at $1,000 each." Owen whistled softly. "Makes them worth stealing." "Makes them worth killing for," Daniel corrected grimly. By mid-morning, they reached the southern boundary where a large herd of horses grazed in a valley protected by hills on 3 sides. Owen counted approximately 60 animals, mostly mares with several yearlings, and a few young stallions kept separate from the main group. 2 men on horseback patrolled the perimeter, waving as their party approached. "Carlos, Emilio," Tess called. "Any trouble last night?" "All quiet, Mrs. Valente," Carlos replied. "But we found fresh tracks along the eastern ridge, at least 4 horses, maybe more." Tess glanced at Owen, who was already studying the distant ridge line. "Show me," he said. They rode to the eastern boundary where the land rose sharply, forming a natural lookout over the valley. The tracks were clear in the soft earth, multiple horses, well shod, moving in formation rather than random grazing patterns. Owen dismounted to examine them more closely. "These aren't more than 8 hours old. They were watching you, learning your patterns." "We've doubled the guards," Daniel insisted. 2 men patrolling at all times. 2 men can be easily overwhelmed," Owen replied, remounting. "And they're watching from a distance, planning their approach." Tess's expression was troubled. "What would you suggest?" "First, move these horses closer to the main ranch. The distance makes them vulnerable." Daniel shook his head. "This is the best grazing land we have. Moving them means less feed, which means weaker horses." "Better weak than stolen," Owen countered. "Second, I want to set up a proper watch rotation, not just patrolling, but concealed observation posts that can spot anyone approaching." "That would require more men than we have," Tess said. "Not if we're smart about it." Owen surveyed the landscape. "The rustlers will come again soon. When they do, I want to be ready." They spent the remainder of the day checking on distant herds and boundary fences. Owen noted every approach, every vulnerability, building a mental map of the ranch's defenses. By late afternoon, they were heading back toward the main house when Tess pulled her horse alongside his. "You've been quiet," she observed. "Just thinking. Care to share those thoughts?" Owen considered for a moment. "Your rustlers aren't random bandits. They're targeting specific animals, using specific approaches. That requires inside knowledge." Tess frowned. "As I said last night, I trust my people. Trust isn't the issue. Information can leak in many ways: casual conversation in town, observations by visitors, patterns that become predictable over time. So what do you suggest? Feed false information. Tell different people different things about where the horses will be. See which story the rustlers act on." She looked troubled by the suggestion. "That means treating my own people with suspicion." "It means being cautious," Owen corrected. "There's a difference." As they crested a rise overlooking the main ranch, Owen was struck again by the beauty of the place. The setting sun bathed the buildings in golden light, smoke curling from chimneys, horses in the corrals, a sense of permanence and purpose that he hadn't experienced in years. "It's a fine ranch," he said quietly. Tess followed his gaze. "James built most of it. He came west with nothing but dreams and determination." Her voice softened with memory. "Everyone said a horse ranch wouldn't succeed here, too remote, too wild, but he proved them wrong. And now you're carrying on his work." "I'm trying." She straightened in her saddle. "This ranch isn't just a business, Mr. Zimmerman. It's a legacy. Those horses aren't just livestock, they're the culmination of James's vision, his life's work. That's why you stayed after he died." "I stayed because this is my home." She met his eyes directly. "When you lose someone you love, you have two choices: you can run from the memories, or you can embrace them and build something meaningful from your loss." Owen felt an uncomfortable resonance with her words. "Some losses can't be built upon, Mrs. Valente." "All losses can be survived," she replied. "The question is whether you choose to merely survive or to live again." With that, she nudged her horse forward, leaving Owen to consider her words as they rode the final distance to the ranch. That evening, Owen declined dinner at the main house, preferring to eat with the ranch hands in the bunkhouse. He needed to gauge the men, to determine who he could trust, and who might knowingly or not be aiding the rustlers. The bunkhouse was a long, low building with bunks lining both walls and a communal area in the center where the men gathered for meals. As Owen entered, conversations quieted momentarily before resuming at a more subdued level. Miguel, the head wrangler, nodded toward an empty seat at one of the tables. "Join us, Mr. Zimmerman. Rosa's stew is worth the price of admission." Owen took the offered place, accepting a bowl of rich beef stew and a chunk of fresh bread. The men around him were a typical mix of ranch workers, weathered faces, calloused hands, eyes that had seen the harshness of frontier life, but retained a fundamental decency. "Heard you rode the southern range today," one man said. "See anything?" "Tracks along the eastern ridge," Owen replied, watching their reactions carefully. "Someone's been watching the herd." Several men exchanged glances. An older hand with a grizzled beard shook his head. "Been saying for weeks we need more men on that boundary. Too much open ground to cover." "Jenkins said the same," another added solemnly. "Week before they got him." Owen continued eating, letting the conversation flow naturally. He learned that most of the men had worked for James Valente for years. They spoke of him with genuine respect, a fair boss who treated his people well. They had similar admiration for Tess, though some harbored concerns about her ability to maintain the ranch against mounting threats. "Mrs. Valente knows horses better than anyone I've ever seen," Miguel said. "But knowing horses ain't the same as stopping men who'd kill for them." "That's why I'm here," Owen replied. A younger hand snorted. "One man against the Becker gang. Good luck with that." "You're certain it's the Beckers?" Owen asked, noting how quickly the name had been mentioned. The men exchanged looks again. "Who else would be bold enough?" Miguel responded. "They've hit 3 other ranches north of here. Take what they want, kill anyone who gets in their way." After dinner, Owen remained in the bunkhouse, joining a poker game that lasted well into the night. The casual setting loosened tongues, and he gathered valuable information which hands frequently went to town, which had money troubles, which were most loyal to the Valents. By the time he returned to his cabin, Owen had formulated a plan. The Beckers, if indeed they were behind the rustling, wouldn't wait long for their next raid. Based on the pattern, they would strike within days, not weeks. As he approached his cabin, he noticed a light burning inside. Hand on his revolver, he pushed the door open slowly to find Tess Valente seated at his table, a map spread before her. "You should be more careful about entering a gunman's quarters unannounced," he said, closing the door behind him. "I took my chances," she replied without looking up. "I've been reviewing the property boundaries. If what you said about the eastern ridge is true, we need to reposition our men." Owen moved to the table, studying the detailed map of the Valente ranch. It showed every fence line, water source, and grazing area in meticulous detail. "Keep the regular patrols as they are," he suggested. "But I want to place men here, here, and here." He indicated 3 elevated positions overlooking the southern pasture. "Concealed, watching rather than riding. The rustlers are counting on your predictability." Tess considered the locations. "That leaves other areas unguarded. It's a calculated risk. Based on their previous approaches, they'll come from the east or southeast." She nodded slowly. "I'll speak to Daniel about rearranging the night watches." Owen noticed the fatigue in her face, the slight slump of her shoulders when she thought no one was watching. Running a ranch of this size would challenge anyone, let alone a woman still grieving her husband. "How long were you married?" he asked, surprising himself with the personal question. Tess looked up, equally surprised. 6 years. We met in St. Louis. I was teaching at a ladies' academy. He was delivering horses to a wealthy client." A small smile touched her lips. "He spent a week courting me, then asked me to come west with him. Everyone thought I was mad to accept." "But you did." "I saw something in him, a vision, a determination that I wanted to be part of." She traced the outline of the ranch on the map. "We built this place together, acre by acre, horse by horse." Her voice wavered slightly. "Pneumonia took him in 3 days. There was nothing anyone could do." Owen felt a familiar ache in his chest. "I'm sorry. What about you?" Tess asked quietly. "Mayor Pearson mentioned a wife." Owen turned away, moving to the window where he could see the moonlit landscape. "Elizabeth," he said finally. "We had a homestead in the Colorado Territory. I was away when Cheyenne raiders hit our valley, by the time I got the telegram and rode back." He fell silent, the memories too vivid to voice. "You blame yourself," Tess observed. "I should have been there, to die alongside her." Owen turned sharply, "To protect her. And then you both might be dead," Tess said gently. "Instead, you're here, alive though perhaps not living." Her perception unsettled him. "I should check the perimeter before turning in." Tess recognized the deflection but didn't press. She rolled up the map carefully. "We'll implement your watch plan tomorrow. I hope it works, Mr. Zimmerman." "Owen," he said impulsively, "if we're going to work together, you might as well use my name." She nodded, a hint of warmth in her eyes. "Owen, then, and I'm Tess, not Mrs. Valente, at least when we're not in formal company." After she left, Owen completed a circuit of the main ranch buildings, checking that guards were posted and alert. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the vast Arizona sky. In the distance, coyotes called to one another, their yips echoing across the valley. The ranch settled into nighttime quiet, but Owen remained restless. He found himself drawn to the corral where several horses dozed or grazed in the moonlight. Among them was Thunder, the bay gelding he'd ridden that day. The horse approached the fence as Owen drew near, nickering softly. "You're an easy raid," Owen murmured, stroking the animal's neck. "Wish people were as straightforward. They can be if you know how to listen." Owen turned to find Tess approaching, wrapped in a shawl against the night chill. She joined him at the fence, reaching out to Thunder, who nuzzled her hand affectionately. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Rarely do, first few nights in a new place." Tess nodded, understanding. "I still sleep poorly most nights. Too much responsibility, too many worries." They stood in companionable silence, watching the horses. Eventually, Tess spoke again. "What will you do when this is finished, when the rustlers are caught?" Owen hadn't thought beyond the immediate job. "Move on, I suppose. There's always another bounty somewhere." "Is that what you want, to drift forever?" "One doesn't enter into it, it's just what is." Tess turned to face him fully. "I don't believe that. Everyone wants something, Owen, even those who claim their hearts have died." Her perception was uncomfortably accurate. "What about you? What do you want, Tess?" "To preserve what James and I built, to see this ranch thrive." She looked out over the property. "And someday, perhaps, to feel something beyond grief again." Her honesty demanded his own. "Some losses cut too deep for recovery." "My heart's died once," Owen finally admitted, echoing her earlier words. "I'm not sure it remembers how to beat for anything beyond the next sunrise." Tess's reply was quiet but firm. "Then I'll teach it to breathe again." The simple declaration hung between them, fraught with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. Owen found himself unable to respond, caught between the impulse to retreat and an unexpected desire to believe her. Before he could formulate a reply, a distant gunshot shattered the night's tranquility. Both of them tensed, listening as two more shots followed in quick succession. "The south pasture," Owen said, already moving toward the stables. "They're making their move." Within minutes, they had horses saddled. Daniel emerged from the main house, buckling on his gun belt, followed by several ranch hands who had been roused by the commotion. "Stay here," Owen ordered Tess as he mounted. "It's my ranch, my horses," she countered, swinging into her saddle with practiced ease. There was no time to argue. Owen, Daniel, and 6 armed hands galloped toward the southern pasture, following the route they had traveled earlier that day. As they rode, Owen outlined a plan to Daniel, who nodded grimly before relaying instructions to the others. They approached the pasture from different directions, using the darkness and terrain for cover. The moonlight was bright enough to reveal movement in the valley, below several riders cutting out a group of horses from the main herd. Owen signaled for the others to hold position while he crept forward on foot, Winchester rifle in hand. From his vantage point, he counted 8 rustlers more than expected, and well armed. They worked with practiced efficiency, separating selected horses and preparing to drive them east toward the hills. He was about to signal the others to move in when he sensed someone beside him. Tess had followed, her expression determined in the moonlight. "I told you to stay behind," he whispered, "and I chose not to listen." She peered at the scene below. 8 of them, too many for a direct confrontation. Owen had to admire her tactical assessment even as he worried for her safety. "We need to spook the herd. If they lose control of the horses, we gain an advantage." Tess nodded. "The lead mare, the chestnut with the blaze. If we can startle her, the others will follow." As they formulated a plan, Movement caught Owen's eye. Daniel had grown impatient and was positioning his men for an attack. Before Owen could signal him to wait, one of the ranch hands fired, the shot echoing across the valley. Chaos erupted immediately. The rustlers returned fire, horses scattered in panic, and men shouted conflicting orders. Owen pushed Tess down behind a boulder. "Stay here," he commanded, and this time his tone brooked no argument. He moved swiftly through the darkness, using the confusion to his advantage. The rustlers were trying to control the spooked horses while returning fire at Daniel's men. Owen approached from their blind side, dropping one man with a precise shot before moving to a new position. The firefight intensified. Owen caught glimpses of Daniel and the ranch hands exchanging shots with the rustlers, but the outcome remained uncertain. The rustlers were well positioned and disciplined, not the work of common bandits. Suddenly, a high whistle cut through the chaos. The remaining horses, already panicked by the gunfire, surged as one toward the sound. Owen realized with alarm that Tess had moved from her sheltered position and was using her connection with the animals to drive them away from the rustlers. Her tactic worked. The horses galloped toward her, breaking the rustlers' formation and forcing them to scatter. But it also placed her in terrible danger as several rustlers turned their weapons toward her. Owen sprinted toward her position, firing as he ran. 2 rustlers fell, but a third had Tess in his sights. Time seemed to slow as Owen threw himself forward, tackling Tess to the ground as bullets whizzed overhead. They rolled together down a shallow embankment, coming to rest with Owen shielding her body with his own. For a moment they lay perfectly still, his heart hammering against hers. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his voice rough with fear. "No," she gasped. "You." Before he could answer, hoofbeats approached. Owen reached for his revolver but relaxed when he recognized Daniel's voice. "Tess, Zimmerman." "Here," Owen called, helping Tess to her feet. Her hair had come loose from its pins, cascading around her shoulders in the moonlight. Despite the danger they'd just faced, Owen was struck by her beauty, wild and fearless. Daniel rode up, his expression a mixture of relief and anger. "What were you thinking?" he demanded of his sister. "You could have been killed." "I was saving our horses," Tess replied, brushing dirt from her clothes. "And it worked. Where are the rustlers?" 3 dead, 2 wounded. The rest escaped. Daniel glanced at Owen. "You're doing?" Owen nodded. "What about our men?" Martinez took a bullet in the arm. "Nothing serious." Daniel dismounted, leading his horse toward them. "The horses are scattered, but they won't go far. We can round them up at first light." Tess placed a hand on Owen's arm, her touch sending an unexpected warmth through him. "Thank you," she said simply. "You saved my life." "You shouldn't have put it at risk," he replied, but there was no anger in his tone, only concern, and something deeper that he wasn't ready to acknowledge. The ride back to the ranch was subdued. The wounded rustlers were tied to their horses, their dead companions draped across saddles. Upon arrival, the wounded were taken to the bunkhouse, where Tess tended their injuries while Daniel locked them in a storeroom under guard. Owen questioned them separately, but neither would reveal much beyond their immediate task: steal specific horses and drive them to a rendezvous point in the hills. They claimed not to know who had hired them, having dealt only with intermediaries. By dawn, it was clear that while they had prevented this raid, the threat remained. The rustlers had escaped with enough knowledge of the ranch's defenses to plan another attack. As the eastern sky brightened, Owen found Tess on the porch of the main house, a cup of coffee cradled in her hands as she watched the sun rise. "You should rest," he said, joining her. "So should you." She offered a tired smile. "But I suspect neither of us will." Owen leaned against the porch railing. Those men were professionals, hired guns, not gang members. This wasn't the Beckers. Then who? Someone with resources and specific knowledge of your operation. Owen hesitated. Someone who wants your ranch badly enough to eliminate your horses, your men, and eventually you. Tess's expression hardened. There's been pressure to sell. The railroad's coming through 15 miles south. Land values are rising. Who stands to gain most if you fail? She shook her head. Several investors have made offers. Holcomb from the Territorial Bank, Judge Wilkins. Even Mayor Pearson expressed interest before offering to hire you. Owen straightened. Pearson. The connection seemed too convenient to ignore. His son works here. Peter's been invaluable since James died. Tess frowned. He couldn't be involved. Perhaps not knowingly, Owen conceded, but information flows many ways. Before they could discuss it further, a rider approached the ranch at a gallop, one of the hands who had been searching for scattered horses since dawn. Mrs. Valente. He called, reining to a stop. We found something you need to see. 20 minutes later, Tess, Owen, and Daniel stood in a secluded draw 5 miles from the main ranch. Before them lay the bodies of 3 men, executed with single shots to the back of the head. I recognize them, Daniel said grimly. These are the rustlers who escaped last night. Owen knelt beside the bodies, examining the wounds. Professional work. Someone's tying up loose ends. Tess's face had gone pale. Who would do this? Someone who doesn't want them talking. Owen stood, scanning the surrounding landscape. Someone who knows exactly what's happening on your ranch. The implications were clear. Their enemy was closer than they had realized, perhaps watching them at this very moment. As they rode back to the ranch, Owen's mind worked through the possibilities. The mayor's involvement seemed increasingly likely, but direct evidence was lacking. They needed to flush out the true mastermind. We need to set a trap, he told Tess and Daniel when they were safely back at the ranch. Make them think they've succeeded, then catch them when they reveal themselves. Daniel looked skeptical. How? Spread word that several of your most valuable horses were stolen in last night's raid, that the ranch is in financial trouble because of it. Then watch who makes the next move. Tess considered the plan. It could work. Peter often carries news to town. We could send him with the false information. Without telling him it's false, Owen added. The reaction must be genuine. Daniel's expression darkened. I don't like suspecting Peter. He's been loyal to us. We're not accusing him, Tess said gently. But we need to know who's using information from this ranch against us. The plan was set in motion that afternoon. Peter was sent to Gila Bend with news that the rustlers had succeeded in stealing 10 prime horses, placing the Army contract in jeopardy. Meanwhile, the ranch continued normal operations, though with heightened security, and the valuable horses moved to a hidden canyon known only to Tess and a few trusted hands. That evening, Owen positioned himself on the hills overlooking the main road to the ranch, watching for any unusual activity. The night passed quietly, but his instincts told him they were being observed. Near dawn, he returned to his cabin to find Tess waiting for him. She looked exhausted but determined, her face showing the strain of the past days. Anything? She asked. Nothing yet, but they'll make a move soon. He removed his gun belt, setting it carefully on the table. You should be in the main house where it's safer. I needed to talk to you. She rose, pacing the small cabin. I've been thinking about what you said about someone wanting the ranch. There's something I haven't told you. Owen waited, sensing her hesitation. 2 days before James died, he told me he'd discovered something that could change everything for the ranch. She turned to face him. He said he'd found gold in the northern hills on our property. Owen's brow furrowed. Gold? Are you certain? He showed me a sample. It wasn't much, but he was convinced there was more. He planned to register the claim after delivering the Army horses. She wrapped her arms around herself. Then he fell ill so suddenly. By the time I thought to look for his sample, it was gone from his desk. Did anyone else know? I don't think so. James was cautious. He wanted to secure the claim before word spread. She met his gaze. I'd almost forgotten until you mentioned someone wanting our land badly enough to kill for it. The pieces were falling into place. If the Valente ranch contained gold, it would explain the coordinated efforts to force Tess out, not just for the railroad development, but for mineral rights potentially worth a fortune. We need to search James's papers, Owen said. Any maps, notes, anything that might indicate where he found the gold, Tess nodded. His study has remained untouched. I couldn't bear to go through his things. Together, they crossed the dark yard to the main house. The pre-dawn hour meant most of the household still slept, allowing them to reach James's study undisturbed. It was a masculine space: leather chairs, bookshelves, a large oak desk dominating the room. Tess lit a lamp, its warm glow revealing walls decorated with maps of the ranch and surrounding territories. Where do we start? His most personal items, things he would have kept secure. They began a methodical search: desk drawers, hidden compartments, books that might contain tucked-away notes. As the sky outside lightened from black to gray, their search grew more desperate. "There's nothing here," Tess said finally, slumping into her husband's chair. "Perhaps I misunderstood." Perhaps he was mistaken. Owen leaned against the desk, thinking. If I had discovered something valuable on my property, something I wanted to keep secret until I could secure it legally, where would I hide the information? He glanced around the room, his gaze settling on a large map of the ranch mounted on the wall. There. That's where I'd hide it in plain sight. He moved to the map, examining it carefully. It was detailed, showing every feature of the Valente property: buildings, water sources, grazing lands. Along the northern boundary, a small area had been marked with what appeared to be random survey notations. "What's this section here?" he asked, pointing. Tess joined him, frowning slightly. "Just rocky hills, not much good for grazing." Owen studied the notations more closely. They didn't follow standard survey formats. Instead, they appeared to be a simple cipher. "These aren't survey marks, they're coordinates." Understanding dawned in Tess's eyes. "James was a surveyor before he was a rancher. He taught me some of his methods." She traced the markings with her finger. "You're right. These could indicate a location." The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted them. Daniel appeared in the doorway, expression questioning as he took in the scene. "What's going on?" he asked. Tess hesitated only briefly before explaining their theory about the gold and James's hidden claim. Daniel's initial skepticism gave way to thoughtful consideration as she showed him the map markings. "If you're right," he said finally, "it explains why someone's so determined to take the ranch." "But who? We'll find out soon enough," Owen replied. "Our false information should draw them out." As if on cue, the sound of an approaching rider reached them. Through the window, they saw Peter galloping toward the house, his expression urgent as he dismounted. "What's happened?" Tess asked as he burst into the study. "Mayor Pearson," Peter gasped, out of breath from his ride. "He's been shot. They found him this morning behind the bank." The news landed like a physical blow. "Dead?" Owen asked sharply. Peter nodded grimly. "Sheriff thinks it happened sometime last night." "And there's more. Judge Wilkins is calling for an immediate ruling on your Army contract. He says with the recent thefts, you can't possibly fulfill your obligation." Owen and Tess exchanged glances. Their plan had worked, but not in the way they'd anticipated. Someone had eliminated Pearson, perhaps to silence him, perhaps because he'd outlived his usefulness in the scheme to acquire the Valente ranch. "Peter," Owen said carefully, "did you tell anyone specifically about the stolen horses, about our financial troubles?" The young man looked confused. "Just the mayor, as Mrs. Valente instructed, and I mentioned it to Judge Wilkins when I saw him at the saloon." His expression grew worried. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," Tess assured him. "You did exactly as asked." After Peter left to tend his horse, Owen paced the study. "Wilkins, it fits. As a judge, he'd have the power to force foreclosure on your property if you failed to meet contract obligations. And access to men who could organize the rustling," Daniel added. "He's known for his connections to certain elements in the territory." Tess's expression hardened with determination. "If James found gold on our land and Wilkins somehow learned of it, he'd stop at nothing to gain control." "We need proof," Owen said. "And we need to secure whatever James found before Wilkins can claim it." They decided to split up. Daniel would ride to town to learn more about Pearson's death and watch Wilkins, while Owen and Tess would follow the map coordinates to locate James's discovery. By mid-morning, Owen and Tess were riding north through increasingly rugged terrain. The summer heat pressed down as they climbed into the hills, following James's coded directions. Tess rode with focused intensity, occasionally consulting the copy of the map markings they had made. "It should be just ahead," she said as they crested a ridge overlooking a narrow canyon. "There's a cave entrance marked here." They dismounted, securing their horses in a small grove of juniper before continuing on foot. The cave entrance was well hidden behind a tumble of rocks that appeared natural but showed signs of having been deliberately arranged. "James was thorough," Owen observed as they cleared enough rocks to squeeze through. "Most people would ride past without noticing." Inside, the cave extended deeper than expected, opening into a larger chamber where evidence of recent activity was apparent. A small camp setup, mining tools, and several sample bags carefully labeled. Tess moved to a rock shelf where a leather journal lay beside sample bags containing ore. She opened it with reverent hands, recognizing her husband's precise handwriting. "This is it," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "James's notes on the gold vein he discovered." She turned pages, reading quickly. "According to his estimates, it's substantial enough to make the Valente Ranch one of the richest properties in the territory." Owen examined the sample's quartz veined with unmistakable threads of gold. "This would explain a lot of determination to acquire your land." A noise from the cave entrance snapped them both to attention. Owen drew his revolver, positioning himself between Tess and the approaching sound. "Tess," Daniel's voice echoed through the passage. "Zimmerman." They relaxed slightly as Daniel appeared, his expression grave. "We have trouble. Wilkins has obtained a court order to inspect the ranch. Claims he's received information about fraud regarding the Army contract." "How did you find us?" Owen asked, a note of suspicion in his voice. "Followed your trail. Wasn't hard." Daniel glanced around the cave. "So it's true." "James found gold," Tess nodded, showing him the journal and samples. "Enough to change everything." Daniel's face showed conflicting emotions: relief, excitement, and something darker that Owen couldn't quite identify. "This explains why Wilkins wants the ranch so badly," Daniel said. "And why Mayor Pearson had to die." "Pearson was working with Wilkins?" Tess asked. Daniel hesitated. "Not exactly." He moved further into the cave, examining the tools and samples with unusual intensity. "Pearson discovered what Wilkins was planning and threatened to expose him. That's why he hired Zimmerman, not to stop the rustlers, but to protect you from Wilkins." Owen watched Daniel carefully, noting how his hand kept straying to his coat pocket. "How do you know this?" Overheard Wilkins talking to his men in town. Daniel picked up one of the ore samples, weighing it in his hand. "This changes everything for the ranch, Tess, for all of us." Something in his tone set Owen's instincts on alert. We should get back. If Wilkins is coming with a court order, we need to be prepared. There's no rush, Daniel said, his manner suddenly calm. Wilkins won't be at the ranch until tomorrow. Tess frowned. But you just said. I said what I needed to say to find you. Daniel's hand emerged from his pocket holding a revolver, which he pointed steadily at Owen. Drop your gun, Zimmerman. The betrayal hit Tess like a physical blow. Daniel, what are you doing? What's necessary, he replied, his voice strangely detached. I've worked too hard to lose everything now. Understanding dawned in Owen's eyes. It was you, working with Wilkins. Daniel's smile held no warmth. Wilkins approached me months ago. He suspected what James had found, needed someone on the inside to confirm it. His gaze shifted to his sister. I never meant for you to be hurt, Tess, but James wouldn't listen to reason. He wanted to develop the mine himself, keep the profits in the family. So you killed him, Tess whispered, horror spreading across her face. Pneumonia killed him, Daniel corrected, though his eyes betrayed the lie. I just helped it along. A few drops in his medicine each day, untraceable. Owen kept his expression neutral, mind racing for a way out of their predicament. Daniel's position near the cave entrance blocked their escape, and while Owen might risk a shot, he couldn't guarantee Tess's safety if he did. The rustling. The killed hands. That was all you. Tess's voice broke with the weight of her brother's betrayal. Necessary sacrifices, Daniel replied. Once you were forced to sell, Wilkins promised me a significant share, enough to start fresh somewhere else. And Mayor Pearson became a liability when he hired Zimmerman. Started asking too many questions. Daniel gestured with his gun. Now, Zimmerman, your gun on the ground, slowly. Owen complied, placing his revolver on the cave floor. Kick it over here. As Owen moved to follow the instruction, he deliberately stumbled, sending a cascade of loose rocks and tools clattering across the cave floor. In the moment of distraction, he lunged at Daniel, tackling him with enough force to send them both crashing against the cave wall. The revolver discharged, the shot deafening in the enclosed space. The two men grappled for control of the weapon, each blow echoing off stone walls as Tess scrambled for Owen's discarded gun. Daniel fought with desperate strength, landing a solid punch to Owen's jaw that momentarily stunned him. As Daniel raised his gun for a killing shot, a second gunshot rang out. Daniel froze, an expression of disbelief spreading across his features as he looked down at the growing red stain on his chest. He turned slowly to see Tess standing with Owen's revolver still aimed at him, her hand steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Tess, Daniel gasped, collapsing to his knees. I'm sorry. So am I, she whispered as her brother slumped to the ground. Owen moved to check Daniel's wound serious, but not immediately fatal. He tore strips from his shirt to bind it, though whether Daniel would survive the ride back to the ranch remained uncertain. We need to get him to a doctor, Owen said, looking up at Tess, who stood motionless, the revolver still in her hand. He killed James, she said, her voice hollow. My own brother. Owen gently took the gun from her grasp. I know, but right now we need to get back to the ranch. Wilkins will be making his move soon. They managed to get Daniel onto his horse, securing him in the saddle as he drifted in and out of consciousness. The ride back was grim and silent, each lost in their own thoughts as the sun began its westward descent. Upon reaching the ranch, they found several of the hands gathered anxiously in the yard. Mrs. Valente, Miguel called as they approached. Judge Wilkins is here with the sheriff and several men. They're demanding to inspect the property. Owen helped lower Daniel from his horse. He's been shot. Get him to a bed and send for the doctor from town. He turned to Tess, who had dismounted but seemed frozen in place. Tess, he said gently, I need you with me now. We have to face Wilkins together. His voice seemed to reach her through her shock. She straightened, composing herself with visible effort. Yes, together. They found Wilkins in the main house, making himself comfortable in James's study. The territorial judge was an imposing man in his 50s, expensively dressed and radiating authority. Sheriff Holden stood uncomfortably near the door, clearly unhappy with his role in the proceedings. "Mrs. Valente," Wilkins greeted her with false concern. "I'm sorry for the intrusion, but serious allegations have been made regarding your Army contract." "As a territorial judge, I have the authority to save it, Wilkins," Owen interrupted, closing the study door behind them. "We know everything." The judge's expression hardened. "Mr. Zimmerman, I was told you'd completed your business here." "My business is just beginning," Owen replied coldly. "Daniel confessed everything before he was shot." A flicker of alarm crossed Wilkins's face before he controlled it. "I don't know what you're talking about. Daniel who?" "My brother," Tess said, her voice gaining strength. "Who helped you murder my husband, terrorize my ranch, and attempt to steal what was rightfully ours." Wilkins laughed, though it didn't reach his eyes. "These are absurd accusations. Sheriff, I believe Mrs. Valente may be unwell after the recent stresses. We found James's gold claim," Owen cut in. "All his documentation, samples, and the exact location. It's already been registered with the territorial office in my presence this morning." This was a bluff. They had no time to register anything, but Wilkins couldn't know that. The judge's confident facade cracked slightly. "Sheriff," Wilkins said, his voice tight, "arrest this man for interference with a judicial proceeding." Sheriff Holden remained by the door, his expression troubled. "Judge Wilkins, is there any truth to these accusations?" "Of course not," Wilkins snapped. "Now do your duty." "My duty is to justice," the sheriff replied slowly. "And I've been suspicious about Mayor Pearson's murder since I found peculiar tracks behind the bank, tracks from fancy Eastern boots, not unlike the ones you're wearing." Wilkins's composure shattered. With unexpected speed, he drew a derringer from his vest pocket, aiming it at Tess. "Enough. Both of you against the wall." Owen stepped deliberately between Tess and the gun. "It's over, Wilkins. Even if you kill us both, the claim is registered. The evidence of your conspiracy is documented. You've lost." For a moment, the room balanced on a knife's edge of tension. Then Wilkins's shoulders sagged, the fight draining from him as he realized the futility of his position. Sheriff Holden moved quickly, disarming the judge and securing his hands behind his back. "Judge Wilkins, you're under arrest for the murder of Mayor Pearson and conspiracy to commit numerous other crimes in this territory." As the sheriff led Wilkins away, Owen turned to Tess, concern evident in his face. "Are you all right?" She nodded slowly. "I will be, eventually." Her eyes met his. "What you said about registering the claim, that wasn't true, was it?" "No," but Wilkins didn't know that. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Then we should probably ride to the territorial office tomorrow and make it true." The following days passed in a blur of activity. Daniel survived his wound, though he remained under guard until he could stand trial for his role in James's death and the subsequent crimes. Wilkins, facing overwhelming evidence once Daniel began talking to save himself, was held without bail awaiting federal authorities. Owen accompanied Tess to the territorial office, where James's gold claim was officially registered. The news spread quickly through the region, bringing both congratulations and opportunists hoping to benefit from the Valente fortune. Through it all, Tess maintained a quiet dignity, grieving anew for her husband while coming to terms with her brother's betrayal. Owen remained at her side, handling inquiries, discouraging fortune seekers, and ensuring the ranch continued to operate smoothly. A week after Wilkins's arrest, Owen found Tess in the stables late one evening, brushing Thunder with methodical strokes. The bay gelding had become his regular mount during his stay at the ranch, developing a clear attachment to both Owen and Tess. "He'll miss you when you go," Tess said without turning around. Owen leaned against the stall door. "Who says I'm going?" Now she did turn, her eyes searching his face. "Isn't that what you do? Move on once the job is finished, usually." He stepped into the stall, taking the brush from her hands. "But I'm reconsidering my usual patterns. Because of the gold," a hint of hurt colored her voice, "because of you." His directness surprised them both. "You said you'd teach my heart to breathe again. I'd like to give you that chance." Tess's eyes widened. "Owen, I don't expect anything," he added quickly. "I know you're still healing from James, from Daniel's betrayal. I'm not ready to leave. Not yet." She studied him for a long moment, then reached up to touch his face gently. "I'm not ready for you to leave either." It wasn't a declaration of love, they were both too wounded for that yet, but it was a beginning, a promise to try, to see if two damaged hearts could find healing together. "The Army contract," Owen said, changing the subject to give them both space to absorb this new understanding. "Will you be able to fulfill it?" Tess nodded, stroking Thunder's neck. "Yes, the horses are all accounted for now that the rustling has stopped. The gold discovery changes everything financially, of course, but the horses have always been the heart of this ranch. I won't abandon James's vision for that. You'll need someone to oversee security for the mine development." A smile touched her lips. "Are you applying for the position, Mr. Zimmerman?" "Maybe," he returned her smile. "Depends on the terms. Room and board included, reasonable salary." Her eyes held a warmth he hadn't seen before. "Company of the owner occasionally if desired." "Frequently desired," he corrected softly. The weeks that followed brought gradual healing to both the ranch and its mistress. Development of the gold mine began under careful management, with profits reinvested in expanding the horse breeding program. The Army contract was fulfilled on time, with the commander so impressed by the quality of the stock that he immediately negotiated for future purchases. Owen found himself settling into ranch life with surprising ease. His skills proved valuable not just for security, but in various aspects of the operation. The hands came to respect his quiet competence, while the horses, perhaps sensing Tess's approval, accepted him as part of their world. Tess watched him transform gradually from the hardened bounty hunter to a man who could occasionally laugh, who developed preferences and routines, who began to speak of future plans rather than past regrets. She never pushed, never demanded more than he could give, but remained a steady, healing presence in his life. Their relationship evolved slowly, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. Quiet evenings on the porch gave way to longer conversations by the fire. Accidental touches became intentional ones. The shadows in Owen's eyes receded, though they never completely disappeared. 3 months after his arrival at the Valente Ranch, Owen rode to Gila Bend for supplies. While there, he visited a small shop he'd discovered weeks earlier, making a purchase he carefully secured in his saddlebag before riding back. That evening, he found Tess in the garden behind the main house, a peaceful space she'd created to honor James's memory. Lanterns hung from tree branches, casting a warm glow over flowering plants and comfortable benches. "Beautiful night," he said, joining her on a bench beneath a cottonwood tree. She agreed, leaning slightly against his shoulder. "Did you get everything you needed in town?" "Almost." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "There's something I want to give you." He handed her a small wooden box, intricately carved with horse figures. Tess opened it carefully to find a delicate silver pendant, a horse in full gallop, expertly crafted. "Owen, it's beautiful," she breathed, lifting it from the box. "The silversmith in town made it from my design." He took the necklace from her hands, moving to fasten it around her neck. "I wanted you to have something that represented both your past and your future." As his fingers brushed her skin, Tess turned to face him. "And what about your future, Owen? Have you decided what that looks like?" In answer, he leaned forward and kissed her gently at first, then with growing certainty as she responded. When they finally parted, the connection between them had transformed into something new and undeniable. "I think my future looks a lot like this," he said softly. "If you'll have me." Tess's eyes shimmered with tears, but her smile was radiant. "I told you I'd teach your heart to breathe again." "You did more than that," Owen admitted, holding her close. "You taught it to live again." 1 year later, Owen stood on the porch of the Valente Ranch, now the Zimmerman Ranch, following their wedding 6 months prior. The property had flourished under their joint stewardship. The gold mine produced steadily, its profits allowing them to expand the horse breeding program beyond their original ambitions. Their reputation for exceptional stock had spread throughout the territories, bringing buyers from as far as California and Texas. Tess joined him on the porch, her body showing the first subtle signs of their child, due in the winter. She slipped her arm through his, leaning against his shoulder as they watched the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant hues. "Thinking deep thoughts?" she asked. Owen smiled, covering her hand with his own. "Just counting blessings." "And how many have you counted so far?" "Too many to name." He turned to face her, still marveling at how this remarkable woman had transformed his life. 3 years ago, I wouldn't have believed this possible. Wouldn't have wanted to believe it." Tess reached up to trace the lines of his face, softer now, less haunted. "When I said I'd teach your heart to breathe again, I had no idea mine would learn to soar in the process." Owen placed his hand gently over her growing belly, feeling the future stirring beneath his palm. "Elizabeth would have liked you," he said quietly the first time he had spoken his first wife's name without pain. "She always said I was too serious, too focused on what might go wrong." "She was a wise woman," Tess replied, understanding the significance of the moment. "I wish I could have known her." "In some ways you saved her too," Owen said thoughtfully, "by helping me remember her with love instead of guilt." As darkness settled over the land they had fought for and won together, Owen Zimmerman held his wife close, marveling at the journey that had brought them here. From a man who once declared his heart had died to one who now felt it beating strong and sure with purpose and love. From a woman determined to preserve her husband's legacy to one creating a new legacy built on the foundation of the old. The stars appeared one by one above them, witnesses to the truth they had discovered together, that even hearts that believe themselves beyond repair can learn to beat again in the right hands.